The case of Black Dahlia remains one of the most mysterious and disturbing in the criminal history of the United States. In 1947, the brutal attack of a young actress in Los Angeles shook the world, but what happened next, details, theories, and suspects made it an unsolved case. Today we are going to delve into the case that is still subject to speculation even 70 years later. What do you think really happened? Join us to discover the most shocking theories about this mystery. Elizabeth Short's story, The Black Dahlia. Elizabeth Short moved to California at age 19 in hopes of a career in film. But what seemed to be the beginning of a brilliant story ended tragically. Despite her beauty and great enthusiasm for acting, her life was marked by personal struggles and the constant search for opportunity that finally never came. Although he did not reach fame, his name became infamous after his tragic death. On January 15, 1947, the body of a woman was found in an empty park in Los Angeles, in an area known as Leimert Park. The body was severely damaged, split in two at waist level, with visible signs of extreme violence. The woman's face had unusual cuts that deformed her expression, giving it a disturbing and hard-to-forget look. This victim was Elizabeth Short, who at the time of the events was only 22 years old. Elizabeth Short was nicknamed the Black Dahlia due to a combination of factors. This nickname arose from the tabloid media of the time, and there are several theories about its origin. During 1946, a year before the Short tragedy, the film The Blue Dahlia, a black film thriller that became very popular, was released. Newspapers are believed to have adopted the nickname Black Dahlia by playing with the title of this film, relating it to her case because of the halo of mystery surrounding her life and death. Elizabeth Short used to dress in black, contributing to a mysterious image. She also had dark hair, which reinforced the association with black. At that time, newspapers tended to give flashy and dramatic nicknames to crime cases to attract readers. The name Black Dahlia encapsulated both her appearance and the notoriety of her murder. This nickname not only helped to build the aura of mystery around. Elizabeth Short was born on July 29, 1924 in Hyde Park, Boston, Massachusetts, the third of 5 daughters. Grew up in a working-class family. His childhood was marked by a devastating event. His father, Cleo Short, who worked designing mini-golf courses, during the Great Depression abandoned his family by faking his death, leaving his car near a lake. This forced his mother, Phoebe Mayer, to raise her daughters alone in Medford, Massachusetts, facing the economic difficulties of the time. Cleo Short's decision to leave her family in 1930 was influenced by the global economic crisis of the Great Depression, which began with the stock market crash in 1929. This financial collapse severely affected many countries, including his family, who faced economic and personal difficulties, especially his father, who lost his business. This situation could have led to Cleo running away from her responsibilities and the life she was leading. The disappearance of Elizabeth's father left the family helpless. Her mother, Phoebe, took care of raising the daughters, working in factories and other low-wage jobs to support the family. Despite the difficulties, she always sought the welfare of her daughters, though without the support of her husband. This seriously affected household dynamics as they had to live with constant economic uncertainty. Elizabeth and her sisters grew up in this precarious environment, and family tensions were part of their daily lives. As she grew older, Elizabeth became more independent, looking for opportunities outside of home to escape the life in which she was raised. From an early age, Elizabeth showed an interest in the glamorous Hollywood movie theaters and stages. Inspired by the stars of the time, she had a strong desire to become an actress. Suffering from chronic asthma, she used to spend winters in Florida to relieve her symptoms and summers in Medford. His interest in film and life in Los Angeles was a haven that nurtured his dreams of escaping the routine. At 19, Elizabeth moved to Vallejo, California, to live with her father, who had reappeared after years of absence, wanted to reconcile with his wife, but Phoebe, wrapped in resentment, refused to forgive him, left alone to raise their daughters with modest jobs and public assistance. However, the relationship between Elizabeth and her father was tense and conflicted. He criticized her habits and the dates she had with men who wanted her, so he finally kicked her out. Cleo hoped her daughter would adopt a more domestic and traditional role, disapproving of her aspirations to become an actress, but she had bigger ambitions. Elizabeth was not willing to follow this model and, after an intense discussion with her father, decided to leave. This reflected the deep tensions between them, as his father did not accept his career dreams, which caused more emotional distance between them. Elizabeth moved on her own and took occasional jobs to support herself, including one at Cook's Camp, a military facility linked to aviation activities and space launches. There he worked in administrative or service functions in support of troops. This period preceded her move to Los Angeles, where she continued pursuing her dream of becoming an actress while maintaining her independence. Later, in 1943, while living in Santa Barbara, she was arrested for drinking as a minor. This arrest marked her first encounter with the authorities, who returned her to Medford under the supervision of her mother. Over the next few years, Elizabeth lived in various cities in Florida where she worked as a waitress to support herself. It was during this time that he met Matthew M. Gordon Jr., a military pilot in the 2nd Air Command. According to Elizabeth, Gordon proposed in a letter from India while she was recovering from an air crash. Accepted the proposal, but Gordon died tragically in another plane crash in August 1945 before returning to the United States. This had a great impact on her, as he was a man whom she had truly loved. After Gordon's proposal, I was excited about the possibility of a stable and happy life. His passing left Elizabeth devastated. The idea of having missed the opportunity to start a family with him deeply marked her, which affected her personal life in the months leading up to his death. Coupled with the lack of family support and difficulties she faced in her professional life, it contributed to the aura of desolation that seemed to surround Elizabeth Short, who, despite her beauty and her dream, could never find the emotional stability she so much desired. Although some friends confirmed the relationship between them, Gordon's family denied any romantic link after Elizabeth's death. In early 1946, Elizabeth returned to Southern California, determined to pursue her dreams of acting in Hollywood. During that time, she met up with an old boyfriend, Lieutenant Gordon Fickling, but their relationship was brief. In the months leading up to her death, Elizabeth lived in Los Angeles, staying at hotels and boarding houses, and occasionally working as a waitress. She spent most of her money on clothes and makeup, convinced that some Hollywood talent scout would discover her unique beauty. Her dark hair, pale skin, and enigmatic gaze made her a captivating figure, but many described her as reserved and lonely. Although he moved to California in search of opportunities, he did not find the success he had dreamed of. He did some minor jobs but never got the major role he wanted. The attack on Elizabeth was heavily covered by the media, often distorting her life with rumors and speculation. Some newspapers tried to link her to a life of promiscuity or illicit activities, while others idealized her as a young dreamer caught in the shadows of Hollywood. Police investigations never succeeded in identifying the culprit, and the case remains unsolved to this day, becoming one of the most famous and shocking crimes in the United States. The crime was carried out with a chilling violence. During the investigation, detectives discovered that the criminal had cut the body with surgical precision. The fact that the body was so carefully laid out, with no signs of struggle and no evidence of an impulsive attack, led many to believe that the perpetrator had some medical training or knowledge of anatomy. Also, the fact that the body was left in plain sight as a kind of message raised many questions about the motivation that led to this tragedy. The investigation began immediately, but the detectives faced numerous obstacles. The media initially helped spread the news of the find, but also complicated the search for clues. Several men came forward claiming to be the cause of his death. Some of them even sent letters to the newspaper or posed as those responsible for the crime, but all were dismissed. Police interviewed hundreds of people, but the case continued without significant progress. In desperation, the police even offered a reward for any information that would lead to solving it. Elizabeth Short's last days are full of uncertain details and multiple versions. In 2013, a new theory was put forward that a photographer named Red Manley, whose full name was Robert Manley, may have been responsible. The investigation suggested that Manley, who had an affair with Short, had a hidden motive. He was said to be connected to the crime, but details were vague, and no evidence was found to confirm him as the culprit. January 8, 1947, Elizabeth was last seen alive by Red Manley, a married man with whom she had a friendly relationship. Manley picked her up in San Diego and took her to the Biltmore Hotel in L.A. According to her account, Elizabeth was hoping to meet her sister, but this never happened. Manley said he left her in the hotel lobby. Red Manley was a crucial character in the events leading up to Elizabeth Short's death. He was a married man who had developed a friendly relationship with Elizabeth, though some speculated about a possible attraction or romantic relationship. However, Manley always maintained that his relationship with Elizabeth was strictly platonic. He met her in 1946 in Los Angeles. At that time, Elizabeth was without a stable place to stay, and her life seemed to be in constant motion. According to him, Elizabeth had asked for this favor to take her to the hotel because she needed to return and did not have the means to do so. After the Biltmore Hotel, Elizabeth was seen at the Crown Grill Cocktail Lounge, a nearby bar. This is the last confirmation of his whereabouts before his disappearance. Red Manley was one of the primary suspects initially due to his closeness to Elizabeth and his presence in the pre-crime events. Authorities subjected him to a polygraph test as part of the investigation into the case, but Manley passed the test, suggesting he was not lying about his version of the facts. However, polygraph tests are not infallible, and today they are not generally accepted as evidence in most courts because of their questionable accuracy. Although the evidence is inconclusive, its result helped to clear up doubts about his direct involvement in the case. He claimed not to have been near Elizabeth after leaving her at the hotel. Investigations found no solid evidence linking him to the crime. Since Manley was married, this may have created tensions that could have influenced the dynamics of the case. Although Manley claimed that his relationship with Elizabeth was strictly friendly, their closeness aroused suspicion and potential conflict in their marriage. His wife, Harriet Manley, may have been jealous or resentful of Elizabeth, who was young and attractive, which would have made the situation even more complicated. There is no direct evidence to implicate Harriet Manley in the crime, but the emotional context and tensions arising from this relationship may have contributed to perceptions and speculation surrounding the case. The enigmatic and rumored figure of Elizabeth may have exacerbated these conflicts, although her role in the events remains uncertain in official investigations. Harriet Manley provided an alibi for her husband, stating that he was at work the day before Elizabeth Short's body was found and that they were together visiting friends that night. After being investigated, Manley tried to get back to life but was left in the cold by his connection to the case. He later suffered from mental health problems and was admitted to a psychiatric hospital as a result of stress and social pressure. January 9th to 15th. There is no clear record of where Elizabeth was during this period. His body was found on January 15th at the Limerick Park wasteland in Los Angeles. His body was cut in two, in a carefully prepared position, suggesting that the criminal wanted to make a media impact. Elizabeth had worked occasionally as a waitress and had contacts in nightclubs. One of the suspects, Mark Hansen, owner of a nightclub where she stayed on occasion, admitted to having conflicts with her. However, the investigation could not link him directly to the crime. Other suspects include doctors and figures linked to Hollywood, but their guilt was never proven. The case was complicated by misinformation and the number of false confessions received by the police. Although the investigation involved hundreds of suspects, it never came to a conclusion as to who was responsible for the crime. False confessions related to the Black Dahlia case are one of the most bizarre and disturbing aspects of crime. During the investigation, the LA police received about 500 confessions from people who claimed to have harmed Elizabeth Short. However, all of them turned out to be false. In the event of massive media coverage, some individuals, motivated by a desire for attention or to go into history, decided to confess, even though they were not involved. They knew that confessions could be investigated and dismissed, many of these people seeking a moment of ephemeral fame. The media attention surrounding the case was immense, and any connection with the Black Dahlia could guarantee headlines or minutes in the news. Or people with psychological problems, confessing a crime of this magnitude gave them a sense of power or importance, something they may have felt was missing in their daily lives. Even if it was a negative notoriety, in his mind it was better than remaining anonymous. The case was surrounded by an aura of mystery and horror. Some individuals with a fascination for the macabre might have confessed as a way of getting involved in the narrative of such a famous case. It is a heartbreaking contrast to think that Elizabeth dreamed of being famous in life, but that fame only came after her tragic death, and not the way she wanted. His life and aspirations were overshadowed by the brutality of his murder, adding an ironic and tragic dimension to his story. This also reflects how society glorifies disease over real achievement. Elizabeth was not recognized as an actress or for her talent, but as a symbolic victim. This generates a bitter reflection on how people's dreams and aspirations can be distorted by circumstances beyond their control. Elizabeth's posthumous fame is not only due to the horror of her case, but because she represented several elements of the American dream of the time: youth, beauty, and ambition. These same characteristics were exploited by the media, making it a cultural myth rather than a real person. False confessions show the desire of some to connect with a media case at all costs, even if that meant taking on a guilt that was not theirs. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's fame reflects a society more interested in the tragic and sensational than in the achievements of those who become public figures. Confessions distracted detectives and diluted efforts to find the real culprit. The police had to spend significant resources in verifying each confession, which delayed the investigation and complicated the case. The fact that so many people were willing to get involved in something so heinous demonstrates the power this case had on the collective psyche of the time. Many of the confessions came from people with mental health problems, such as personality disorders or schizophrenia. Some might even have come to the conclusion that they actually committed the crime, even if it were not true. Some confessors knew their stories were absurd or easily refutable, but they did so as a way of distracting or sabotaging investigations, perhaps out of resentment towards the authorities. At that time, there was a widespread perception that the judicial and police systems were not completely reliable. Some may have confessed as a way of mocking the authorities or testing them. One of the most prominent cases was that of a man who went to the police claiming to be the culprit, but when questioned could not provide consistent details. Others tried to use confessions to negotiate legal benefits in other cases or simply to get the media's attention. Over time, numerous theories and suspects emerged. Popular speculation holds that the perpetrator was a doctor or someone with advanced anatomical knowledge. The clean and precise cut made on Elizabeth Short's body, particularly the way she was sectioned and then laid out, seemed to require skills that a person without medical training could not have performed. In addition, some reports suggest that Short may have been involved in a matter with local doctors, which would give substance to this theory. This theory includes the physician George Hodel, who was investigated for his possible connection to the crime. Elizabeth frequented social circles where she was associated with medical figures and other influential professionals, which may have indirectly linked her to some of the suspects in her case. George Hodel had a suspicious relationship with Elizabeth Short before her death. Hodel was a prominent physician in Los Angeles who became a central suspect due to several circumstantial evidence. Hodel had medical knowledge that could have been used in the precise mutilation of Short's body. In addition, on a recording obtained by the police, Hodel insinuated incriminatingly,
"Suppose I killed the Black Dahlia. They couldn't test it now because they can't talk to my secretary anymore. She's dead."
Referring to her own secretary, Ruth Spaulding, who died in suspicious circumstances 2 years before Elizabeth's murder in 1945. Some suggest that Hodel may have been involved in her death to prevent her from revealing incriminating information about her medical practices. Spaulding is speculated to have discovered illegal activities of Hodel, such as clandestine abortions or medical frauds, and that he may have removed it to silence her. This dark history further fueled suspicions of his involvement in the Black Dahlia case. Hodel was known for his arrogant and eccentric behavior, which explains the casual way he referred to both the attack on Elizabeth and the death of her secretary. This comment was secretly recorded by the police during a surveillance of his residence, which intensified the theories that he may have committed the crime. Following the investigations, Hodel fled to Asia in 1950, which some consider an attempt to avoid arrest. Decades later, his son, Steve Hodel, a former Los Angeles detective, presented his own investigation in the book Black Dahlia Avenger. In it, he argues that his father committed the crime and possibly others. Even showed in Hodel's house, traces of human decomposition in analyses made years later, although the evidence was not conclusive to link him directly to the case. This theory adds to the complexity of the case, which remains officially unsolved but still subject to speculation and analysis in the realm of real crime. However, no theory has been proven, fueling rumors and speculation even to this day. The possibility that Elizabeth Short was a victim of a serial criminal has been raised, a theory that arose from the precision and control reflected in her body layout. Some investigators have suggested that his death may be part of a series of crimes committed against young women in Los Angeles. However, these ideas have been widely debated, especially when trying to link his case with well-known figures like the Night Stalker or the Zodiac Killer. The Night Stalker, who operated in the 1980s, was arrested and convicted of a series of violent crimes, but his connection to Elizabeth is impossible, as the murder occurred decades before her birth. On the other hand, the Zodiac Killer, active in Northern California between the 60s and 70s, was never identified and sent encrypted messages to the press mocking authorities. Although some have speculated that the Zodiac may have started its activity before its confirmed crimes, there is no concrete evidence to link it with the Black Dahlia case. These names often appear in discussions about Elizabeth's murder because they represent the idea of the perfect criminal who is never caught. However, when we look at the times, places, and patterns of these cases, it becomes clear that they are not related to Elizabeth's crime. Despite the interest generated by theories, the links are purely speculative and lack solid evidence. The real problem with these theories is that they divert attention from credible suspects, such as Dr. George Hodel, who had more direct connection to the case. Associations often arise out of public interest in linking famous crimes to create a global narrative, but they have no real foundation. Over the years, several people have approached the police, claiming to know the person responsible for the crime, but no concrete leads have led to a resolution. One of the speculations is that the crime was motivated by a personal vendetta, which may have been involved in a love fight, leading someone close to her to commit the crime. The fact that her body was so brutally attacked could suggest that the assailant had a strong emotional connection with her. A theory that has been discussed in various media is that the crime could be linked to the Hollywood world. Since Chort had ambitions to become an actress, some people have suggested that her death was the result of a conflict related to the entertainment industry. In the years following his death, several men, some of them linked to the world of cinema and television, have been identified as possible suspects. Although all theories have been studied over the years, none has fully solved the mystery of the Black Dahlia. The case remains one of the most controversial and tragic in LA history, and to this day it remains open, fueling debate and investigation. This case remains a matter of speculation, with many people trying to find an answer that still seems to escape logic. Despite the efforts of investigators, the case of Black Dahlia remains unresolved. After decades, Elizabeth Chort remains an emblematic figure of the unsolved crime. Who was responsible for this terrible act? And why did he choose Elizabeth Chort as the victim? Although many attempts to close the case have failed, the figure of Black Dahlia is still alive in the collective imagination. This case is undoubtedly one of the most disconcerting and tragic in the history of American crime. Elizabeth is remembered not only as a victim of brutal crime, but as an iconic figure in mid-20th century Hollywood. In her honor, the Biltmore Hotel in Los Angeles, one of the last places she was seen alive, serves a cocktail called La Dahlia Negra, which blends vodka, Chambord, and Kahlua, evoking with its bitter taste the mystery and tragedy of her life. Despite the years, his case serves as a reminder of the risks and disappointments often lurking behind the glamour of Hollywood. The Black Dahlia case left an indelible mark on popular culture due to its brutality and mystery. Elizabeth Chort's story has inspired numerous films, series and books that explore the details of the crime and its media impact, such as The Black Dahlia, 2006 film directed by Brian De Palma, based on the novel by James Ellroy, that combines real facts with fiction to create a plot full of drama and conspiracies. True Confessions, 1981, starring Robert De Niro and Robert Duvall, it adapts a novel inspired by the case with clear references to the tragedy, although without mentioning it directly. American Horror Story, Murder House, 2011. The first season includes an episode in which Elizabeth Chort appears as a character, integrating her story into the fictional context of the series. The case has also been covered in documentaries, books, and other media, exploring topics such as 1940s Hollywood, media sensationalism, and unsolved crime mysteries. The tragic story of Elizabeth Chort remains a source of inspiration and reflection in contemporary culture. From a psychological point of view, Elizabeth Chort lived through an emotional and economic childhood and adolescence that profoundly influenced her decisions and destiny. The disappearance of her father and his subsequent reappearance created in her an emotional vacuum and a search for stability that was reflected in her personal relationships and ambition for recognition. Raised in a hard-working, resilient mother-led home, Elizabeth developed both admiration for female strength and the desire to escape the economic struggle she witnessed as a child. His fascination with Hollywood emerged as an escape from the difficulties he faced, seeking in cinema a path to safety, admiration, and a different future. However, their lack of preparation and continuing economic difficulties limited their opportunities, intensifying their frustration. Also, the death of her fiancé, Matthew Gordon, was a devastating blow that amplified her sense of abandonment and comfort. Elizabeth lived in a time of strong social pressures, especially for women, and her story reflects the complexities of those dynamics. His tragic end, surrounded by speculation and sensationalism, has been the subject of multiple theories, but the case was never resolved, leaving unanswered questions about the circumstances of his death. The case of the Black Dahlia has become a symbol of the shadows of Hollywood in the 1940s, where dreams of fame and success often crossed paths with exploitation and dangers of the environment. This fact invites us to reflect on the importance of seeking justice with ethics and respect. It is a reminder of how speculation and disease can distort the truth, leaving victims and their families in uncertainty. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the most intriguing and mysterious crimes in history. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think really happened with Elizabeth Short? Which theory do you find most convincing? Leave us your ideas in the comments. If you are interested in this case and want to continue exploring more stories of real crimes, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We see ourselves in the following analysis.